7:45 a.m. March 4, 1947. Basse di Stura rifle range. Outside Turin, Italy. 3 men are led to their final moments. Francesco La Barbera, 30 years old. Giovanni Puleo, 23. Giovanni D'Ignoti, 25. All 3 from Sicily. All 3 condemned to die. This is not medieval Italy. This is not the Inquisition. This is post-war Republican Italy. The fascists are gone. Mussolini is dead. The war has been over for 2 years. A new constitution is being written. Democracy is being rebuilt. And yet, 3 men are about to be executed by firing squad. In 9 months, the Italian Constitution will ban the death penalty forever. Article 27. 1 sentence. La pena di morte non è ammessa. The death penalty is not admissible. But on this cold March morning in 1947, the law still allows it. And President Enrico De Nicola refused to grant clemency. This is the story of Italy's last execution for common crimes, and the transformation that followed. Before we go inside the courtroom, before we talk about the crime, the trial, and the execution that changed Italy forever, subscribe right now. This is not just a story about 3 men who died. This is a story about a country that looked at what it had done and decided, never again. Hit like. Drop a comment. Should the death penalty ever be justified? Let's go back to where it started. November 1945. A farmhouse. A robbery. And 10 people who never came home. November 1945. World War II has just ended. Italy is broken. The country was invaded, occupied, divided. Millions are dead. Cities are rubble. The economy has collapsed. Fascism is gone. But the institutions it created remain, including the death penalty. In 1889, Minister of Justice Giuseppe Zanardelli abolished capital punishment for all common crimes. Italy became one of the first countries in the world to do so. For nearly 40 years, the death penalty did not exist. But in 1926, dictator Benito Mussolini brought it back. He reintroduced execution for anyone who attempted to assassinate the king, the queen, or the prime minister. He expanded it. Political enemies, saboteurs, partisans. During World War II, the death penalty became a weapon of the state. And when the war ended, it remained, temporarily, for violent crimes, for collaboration with the Nazis. The provisional government kept it in place. They said it was necessary, exceptional, temporary. It would not last. Villarbasse, a small town about 20 kilometers from Turin. A farmhouse known as Casina Simonetto, owned by a lawyer named Massimo Giannoli. On the night of November 20th, 1945, 4 men entered the property. Pietro Lalla, 20 years old. He had worked on the farm as a hired hand. He knew the layout. He knew Giannoli kept large sums of cash in the house. He recruited 3 accomplices: Francesco La Barbera, Giovanni Puleo, Giovanni D'Ignoti, all Sicilian, all desperate, all willing. The plan was simple. Rob the lawyer, take the money, disappear. But it went wrong. Giannoli was not alone. 10 people were on the property that night. The lawyer, his housekeeper, his tenant farmer and his wife, their son-in-law, a 2-year-old child, farm laborers, domestic workers, all witnesses, all liabilities. According to trial records, the 4 men killed all 10. The victims were found days later. The crime shocked Italy. Even seasoned investigators described it as one of the most heinous acts of violence in the immediate post-war period. The brutality was incomprehensible, and the manhunt began. Police focused on Pietro Lalla. He had quit his job at the farm just before the massacre. He told people he had received an inheritance in Sicily. It was a lie. Investigators tracked him to Sicily. But before they could arrest him, Lalla was killed in a separate incident. He would never face trial. But his accomplices were not so lucky. Giovanni D'Ignoti was from Turin. Police arrested him first. During interrogation, he confessed. He named La Barbera and Puleo. Both were arrested shortly after. All three were charged with murder during the commission of a robbery. Under Italian law at the time, that was a capital offense. The trial was set for July 1946, and the prosecutor was demanding death. July 5, 1946. The Court of Assizes in Turin. A packed courtroom. Families of the victims. Journalists. The accused sit behind a wooden railing. The evidence is overwhelming. D'Ignoti's confession. Forensic evidence from the scene. Witness testimony placing the men near Villarbasse on the night of November 20th. The defense argues duress. They claim Lala masterminded the plan, that the others were coerced, that they feared for their lives if they refused. The prosecution dismisses it. They argue premeditation, planning, intent. They call the crime an act of unparalleled savagery. The jury deliberates. On July 5, 1946, the verdict is read. Guilty. All three. Sentenced to death. The defense appeals. On November 29, 1946, the Court of Cassation, Italy's highest court, upholds the conviction. The sentence stands. Death by firing squad. The only hope now is clemency, a pardon from the President of the Republic. And that decision rests with one man, Enrico De Nicola. I want to pause here because this is the moment that everything hinges on. July 1946. The trial ends. The sentence is death. But here's what's happening at the exact same time. The Constituent Assembly is meeting in Rome. They are writing the new Italian Constitution. And one of the questions they are debating is this: should the death penalty exist in the new republic? The delegates are divided. Some say yes, for the worst crimes, execution is justified. Others say no, the state should never have the power to kill. And while this debate is happening, 3 men are sitting in prison, waiting, knowing that the country is deciding their fate and the fate of everyone who comes after them. That's the tension. That's the moment. Let's continue. Hold on. Before we get to President De Nicola's decision, I need you to subscribe if you haven't already. Because what happens next, the clemency petition, the execution, and the constitution that changed everything, is the part that explains why Italy became one of the world's strongest voices against the death penalty. Drop a comment. Was the death penalty justified for this crime? Keep watching. Winter 1946 to 1947. La Barbera, Puleo, and D'Ignoti sit on death row. Their families petition for clemency. They argue the men were young, desperate, led astray by Lala. That execution is too harsh. That life imprisonment is sufficient. The petition reaches President Enrico De Nicola. De Nicola is a jurist, a legal scholar, a monarchist who became the provisional head of state after the fall of fascism. He is cautious, measured. He knows the Constitution is being written. He knows Article 27, the abolition of the death penalty, is being debated. But he also knows the crime. 10 people dead. A 2-year-old child among them. He reads the trial transcripts, the evidence, the confessions. And in early March 1947, he makes his decision. He denies clemency. The executions will proceed. While De Nicola deliberates, the Constituent Assembly debates. The question: should the new Constitution abolish the death penalty? The abolitionist faction is led by Giuseppe Bettiol, a Christian Democrat, a legal scholar. He argues that the death penalty is incompatible with human dignity, that the state should not have the power to take life, that Italy's history, the executions under Mussolini, the atrocities of war, proves that state killing cannot be trusted. The opposition argues for pragmatism. They say violent crime requires harsh punishment, that abolition sends the wrong message. The debate is fierce. But on April 15, 1947, 6 weeks after the Villarbasse executions, the Assembly votes. Article 27, Section 4 is approved. La pena di morte non è ammessa. The death penalty is not admissible. The Constitution is signed on December 27, 1947. It enters into force on January 1, 1948. and Italy becomes an abolitionist nation. Permanently. March 4, 1947. Dawn. Francesco La Barbera, Giovanni Puleo, and Giovanni D'Ignoti are informed. The clemency petition has been denied. The execution will proceed. They are given time to write final letters, to say goodbye. Some sources report they were calm, resigned. Others say they wept. At 6 a.m., they are transported from the prison to the Basse di Stura rifle range, a military facility on the outskirts of Turin. The rifle range is still in use today as a civilian shooting club. In 1947, it was the designated execution site. The men are led from the transport vehicle. Witnesses are present. Military officials, judicial observers, a priest, and a journalist, Giorgio Bacca, one of Italy's most prominent reporters. He will later describe what he saw that morning. The cold, the silence, the finality. According to Article 21 of the Italian Penal Code, executions were to be carried out by firing squad within a penitentiary establishment. The condemned were not to be publicly displayed. The Minister of Justice could determine whether the execution was public or private. In this case, it was private. Only authorized witnesses attended. The protocol was precise. The condemned were positioned at the rifle range. A military firing squad assembled. Italian law did not specify the exact number of riflemen. Historical records suggest it was substantial. The command was given. The procedure was completed within minutes. All 3 men were pronounced dead at the scene. The time recorded in official documents, 7:45 a.m. It was over. Italy had carried out its last execution for common crimes. The next day, March 5, 1947, there would be one more. A political execution. 3 members of the fascist National Republican Guard, executed for collaboration with the Nazis. But the March 4th executions are remembered as the last for civilian crimes, the last for robbery, the last for murder unconnected to war. Here's what I keep coming back to. March 4th, 1947. 3 men executed. 6 weeks later, the Constituent Assembly votes to abolish the death penalty. 9 months later, the Constitution comes into force. That timeline tells you everything. The execution didn't happen in some distant past. It happened while the new Italy was being born. And the people writing the Constitution saw what had just been done. A firing squad, 3 bodies, the cold finality of state killing. And they said, this ends now. Article 27 was not an abstract principle. It was a direct response, a rejection, a choice. Italy looked at the death penalty and said, we are better than this. That's the story. Real quick, if you're still watching, you need to subscribe. Because what happens next, the political executions the following day, the Constitution, and Italy's global leadership against the death penalty, is the part that shows you why this matters. Comment below. Should Italy have executed these men? Now, back to March 5th, 5 a.m. March 5th, 1947. One day after the Villarbasse executions, Fort Bastia, near Turin. 3 more men are brought to the execution site. Aurelio Gallo, former Italian SS agent. Emilio Battisti, former SS chief. Aldo Morelli, former Marshal of the Republican National Guard. All 3 served under Mussolini's puppet government in northern Italy during the German occupation. All 3 were convicted of collaborationism, torture, deportation of thousands of people to Nazi death camps. They were sentenced to death in May 1946. And like La Barbera, Puleo, and D'Ignoti, their clemency petitions were denied. The execution proceeds. But this time, something goes wrong. Historical records indicate the first volley killed only Aldo Morelli. Emilio Battisti and Aurelio Gallo were wounded but conscious. According to witness accounts, Gallo spoke to the commanding officer. His final words, as recorded in official reports, were, "You shouldn't shoot again, but do as you wish." A second volley was fired. The execution was completed. These were the last executions in Italian history. For any crime, military or civilian, political or common. After March 5, 1947, Italy never executed another person. December 27, 1947. The Italian Constitution is signed. It is a revolutionary document, written by representatives from across the political spectrum: communists, socialists, Christian Democrats, liberals. They disagree on almost everything, but on one thing they agree. Article 27, Section 4. La pena di morte non è ammessa. The death penalty is not admissible. The language is absolute. No exceptions. No caveats. No except in cases of. Just, it is not admissible. Period. On January 1, 1948, the Constitution enters into force. And with it, the death penalty is abolished. For all common crimes. For all military crimes committed in peacetime. It would take until 1994 for Italy to fully abolish the death penalty even in wartime. But from January 1, 1948 onward, Italy stopped killing people. Permanently. Italy's abolition was not new. It was a return. In 1889, Minister of Justice Giuseppe Zanardelli introduced a new penal code. The Zanardelli Code. It abolished the death penalty for all crimes except military offenses in wartime. It was a radical move. Few countries had done it. Zanardelli argued that the death penalty was barbaric, ineffective, incompatible with a modern justice system. The code remained in force until 1930. That year, fascist dictator Benito Mussolini introduced the Rocco Code, named after his Minister of Justice, Alfredo Rocco. The Rocco Code brought back the death penalty. It expanded it. It weaponized it. And it remained in place through World War II. But when the war ended, Italy began to dismantle the Rocco Code. Piece by piece. The 1948 Constitution completed the work. It restored the Zanardelli tradition. And it enshrined abolition in the nation's founding document. Unchangeable. Permanent. Today, Italy is one of the world's most vocal opponents of the death penalty. The Italian government sponsors resolutions at the United Nations calling for a global moratorium on executions. Italian diplomats lobby abolitionist countries to maintain their bans. Italy refuses extradition to any country where the accused might face execution. In 2015, Italy co-sponsored UN Resolution 69-186. A call for a worldwide moratorium on the death penalty. The resolution passed, and Italy continues to push. Every year, at the UN General Assembly, at the Council of Europe, at bilateral meetings with countries that still execute, the message is consistent. The death penalty is a violation of human dignity. It is cruel. It is irreversible. And it does not work. That advocacy began in 1948. With Article 27, with the decision to say, we will not kill, not as punishment, not as deterrence, not ever. Between 1945 and 1947, Italy carried out 92 executions. 92. Most of them for collaboration with the Nazis. Some for violent crimes committed during the chaos of the post-war period. The Villarbasse executions, La Barbera, Puleo, D'Ignoti, were the last for common crimes. The political executions, Gallo, Battisti, Morelli, were the last overall. After March 5, 1947, the number dropped to 0. And it has remained 0 for 77 years. No executions. No death row. No final appeals. No last meals. No firing squads. The system was dismantled. And it has never been rebuilt. Here is the question Italy had to answer in 1947. The Villarbasse crime was brutal. 10 people killed during a robbery. A 2-year-old child among the dead. The evidence was overwhelming. The confessions were clear. The trial was fair. So, was the death penalty justified? President De Nicola thought so. He denied clemency. He allowed the executions to proceed. But 6 weeks later, the Constituent Assembly said no. They voted to abolish the death penalty. Not because the Villarbasse killers were innocent. Not because the crime was minor. But because they believed the state should not have the power to kill. even when the crime is heinous, even when the evidence is clear, even when the public demands it. That is the principle. That is the choice Italy made. And it is the choice that defines Italian law today. I want to be honest with you. When I first started researching this story, I thought, 10 people dead, a child murdered. How can you argue against the death penalty in a case like this? And then I read Article 27. And I read the debates in the Constituent Assembly. And I understood. The death penalty is not about whether the crime is bad enough. It's about whether the state should have the power to kill. And Italy decided, no, not for any crime, not under any circumstances. Because once you give the state that power, you can't control how it's used. Mussolini proved that. The executions under fascism proved that. And the Constituent Assembly looked at that history and said, never again. We will imprison. We will punish. But we will not kill. That's the principle. And it's why Italy has not executed a single person in 77 years. Basse di Stura, the rifle range where La Barbera, Puleo, and D'Ignoti were executed. It still exists. It is now a civilian shooting club. People come to practice target shooting. Competitive marksmen train there. Families visit. On weekends, you can hear gunfire echoing across the range. Most visitors do not know what happened there in 1947. There is no plaque, no memorial, no marker indicating that this was the site of Italy's last execution for common crimes. The range is just a range. The past is buried, and life continues. The families of the Villarbasse victims never forgot. Some campaigned for harsher sentencing laws. Some called for the death penalty to be reinstated. But the law did not change. The families of the condemned La Barbera, Puleo, D'Ignoti also carried the weight. Their sons, their brothers, executed by the state. Some families moved away, changed their names, tried to forget. Others spoke publicly. They argued their loved ones were coerced. That Lala was the mastermind. That death was too harsh. But the executions had already happened. The men were already dead, and nothing could bring them back. Giorgio Bacca, one of Italy's most respected journalists. He witnessed the March 4th executions. He was there, at the rifle range, watching. Years later, he wrote about it. He described the cold, the silence, the clinical efficiency of the procedure. He described the faces of the condemned, their final moments. And he described his own reaction, the horror, the disgust, the feeling that something fundamental had been violated. Bacca became an abolitionist. He wrote extensively about the death penalty. He argued it was state-sanctioned murder, that it degraded everyone involved, the condemned, the executioners, the witnesses, the society that allowed it. His account of the March 4th executions became one of the most powerful arguments for abolition in Italy, and it influenced public opinion for decades. Is the death penalty justice, or is it vengeance? That is the question at the heart of Article 27. The framers of the Italian Constitution believed punishment should serve a purpose: rehabilitation, protection of society, deterrence. But the death penalty serves none of these. It does not rehabilitate. The condemned is dead. It does not protect society better than life imprisonment. And the evidence shows it does not deter crime more effectively than other punishments. So what does it do? It satisfies a desire for vengeance. An eye for an eye. A life for a life. And the framers of the Constitution said, that is not enough. A modern justice system cannot be built on vengeance. It must be built on principle, on human dignity, on the belief that even the worst offenders retain some measure of humanity. That is the foundation of Article 27. That is the foundation of Italian law. Italy was not the first European country to abolish the death penalty, but it was one of the earliest to enshrine abolition in its constitution. That mattered. It meant abolition was permanent. It could not be reversed by a simple change in government. It required a constitutional amendment, and that is nearly impossible in Italy. Other European countries followed: Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, the United Kingdom. One by one, they abolished the death penalty. Some in the 1960s, some in the 1980s. The UK abolished it in 1965, France in 1981. By the end of the 20th century, every country in the European Union had abolished the death penalty, and the EU made abolition a requirement for membership. No country with the death penalty can join the EU. That standard began with countries like Italy, countries that said, "This is not negotiable. This is a fundamental value, and we will not compromise on it." As of 2025, 112 countries have abolished the death penalty for all crimes. 77 years after Italy enshrined abolition in its constitution. The global trend is clear. More countries are abolishing. Fewer countries are executing. But 55 countries still retain the death penalty. And some, like China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United States, continue to execute regularly. Italy continues to push for global abolition. At the UN, at the Council of Europe, in bilateral talks, the message is unchanged. The death penalty is a violation of human rights. It is cruel. It is irreversible. And it does not work. That advocacy began in 1948, and it continues today, 77 years later. March 4, 1947, 7:45 a.m. Francesco La Barbera, Giovanni Puleo, Giovanni D'Ignoti, executed by firing squad at the Basse di Stura rifle range. Italy's last execution for common crimes. 9 months later, the Italian Constitution banned the death penalty forever. Article 27. One sentence. La pena di morte non ammessa. And Italy has not executed a single person since. 77 years. No death row. No firing squads. No final appeals. The system was dismantled. And it has never been rebuilt. Was the death penalty justified for the Villarbasse crime? 10 people killed. A child among them. The evidence overwhelming. President De Nicola thought so. The Constituent Assembly thought otherwise. They said, the state should not have the power to kill. Not for any crime. Not under any circumstances. That is the principle that defines Italy today. If you want more stories like this, cases where a country made a choice and never looked back, check out my video on the European countries that abolished the death penalty. Link on screen. Subscribe, because I cover cases like this every single week. And comment below. Was Italy right to abolish the death penalty? Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.